Hello and welcome to this humble little YouTube channel, mostly designed for people that I know. This is taking place during the April of 2020, in the middle of the coronavirus isolation situation, and as something to do with something as part of sharing. A number of people that I know have been asking me to put down some thoughts regarding acting tips. So I'm just creating this little channel. Obviously, the likes of Helen Mirren and such like are available on the masterclass online series of activities for those who prefer perhaps a more thorough, or maybe you might perceive a more credible source. However, I've been teaching this for quite some time, so I like to think that I know what I'm talking about. And today, other days, because if you read the information below or the reference of the title of this channel, you might pick up that I'm something of a specialist in the macabre and horror, specifically live macabre and live horror. But also, I'm a kind of general acting tutor as well, and I'm going to focus on that, at least in the next few videos, I suspect, anyway. And today I wanted to start by talking about my perspective on a really commonly known acting technique associated with naturalism and realism. And without going into the differences between those two things for the moment, just talk about the acting technique itself. And this, I think, is a collection of thoughts or tips for those familiar with that particular acting technique or acting concept, and those who maybe haven't come across it before. These are kind of my thoughts that are designed to be across, multiple different levels. People who've come across these ideas before, and maybe people who haven't come across them at all. But the thing that I want to start with, and quite often it's where a lot of acting courses start off anywhere in terms of teaching realistic acting, and that's in the domain of what are usually called given circumstances. That's the term that's usually used, given circumstances. And given circumstances, when it comes down to a scripted play or scripted television drama, are things that you can garner from the script that are absolutely factual about the character, things that you know. They're not judgments on the character, so sort of my character is a bully is not a given circumstances. It's a given circumstance. It might be that they're described as a bully, and that's a given circumstance that they're described as a bully. But there's something that has no judgment. They're pure facts about the character, and that includes everything from the environment, like where they've lived, what the weather is like outside, who their family is and what their living arrangements are, and things like that. And if they live maybe somewhere that you don't live, and live maybe in the past, then traditionally actors will do their research on what it was like to live in the past, and what it was like, or what it is like to live in that particular area. Now, quite often, given circumstances can end up being a little bit unapplicable, or difficult to apply anyway. So let's say I'm doing a traditional naturalistic play. So let's say The Seagull by Chekhov, which is set in Russia at the turn of the 19th to 20th centuries. And I might go and do my research and see what it was like to live in Russia, at least on paper, at that time, and facts about that. Now, it's, even if with the best will in the world, and even with some of the best research in the world, it's kind of hard to go on stage and concentrate, right, I'm in Russia. Particularly if you've never been to Russia and you don't really know what the timbre of that place feels like, and you don't know what the tenor or timbre of being in that time period outside of a bit of theory feels like. So one thing that I always recommend when it comes to applying given circumstances, which are a really important thing. I mean, you can't really perform naturalistically or with any sense of realism without having a good command of the fundamental facts of the character that you're playing and the situation that you're in. So one way that I always find is really useful to when it comes to establishing given circumstances and then turning them into something that I can act are the way that you focus, or the way that you can focus on what I would term the abject or abjection. Now, abjection is an idea mostly associated with a scholar called Julia Kristeva, or a philosopher, however you want to think of her, who wrote about this idea of abjection, things that pertain to going into the body, coming out of the body, wanting to have things in your body that should be in your body, and if they're out of the body, then they're kind of disgusting. So anything that pertains to kind of vomit and food and feces and things like that. And I always think that, as odd a link as it may be, those things are kind of a really useful connection between the given circumstances and you as an actor having something to play if you focus on the abject. So, because it connects your body on a more visceral level to the circumstances of the play or the script. So rather than just asking, okay, what kind of clothes am I wearing? Where am I? What village do I live in? How old am I? What brothers and sisters do I have in terms of my character? Those are important things to know, of course. But focusing on what is that person's diet? What has that person eaten today? What's the most delicious thing that that person has ever eaten? What's the most ostentatious thing that that person has ever eaten? How does that person generally eat? Because that's something that you can ground. It's also something that if you wanted to replicate or play around with yourself in terms of how it makes you feel, and then let that inform your physical life, you can do that. Likewise, what is that person's bathing and cleanliness ritual? How many sets of clothes do they have? It might be the case that they dress quite well, but they only have one working set of clothes. I mean, again, going back to the seagull, if you've got a character like Medvedenko, who's a school teacher, probably has got one set of quite nice clothes, and he literally wears them 5 days a week. And again, that's something that can really strongly inform the way that you physically carry yourself and the way that you personally can create a connection to the character that you're playing, who may be very distant, time-wise, type-wise, whatever, from you. You know, going back to even more the abject, won't dwell too long on this, but under what circumstances does that person relieve themselves? Because that's something that, particularly if you're doing something historic, or you're doing something that's cross-society, can be incredibly different from the way that you assume, and therefore the way that you physically feel. You know, are you a character who goes outside into the wild, or uses a hut that's outside of the home? You know, and these things are things that you can research really quite easily. But it's often not the kind of research that people tend to do when establishing their given circumstances. You know, not pleasant to think about just now, but for instance, what's the worst medical situation that character is likely to have ever come across in their life? Is there a particular disease? What does it do? Has that character likely had it, or known and witnessed people who've had it? Again, that can create a connection to the body. And maybe even just thinking, when was the last time that this character was sick, and how often do they get sick? And what happens when they get sick? Are things that you can connect your body to. quite quickly and quite well, and in a way that does transfer across time in a meaningful way that allows you to carry yourself in a particular manner or engage in a bit more of an informed, what is it like to be me, as in this character. And I really like taking that kind of approach to given circumstances. Again, you can research all of these things like diet, things like plumbing, or however you want to phrase that, things like cleanliness and clothing, and for a particular class in a particular place, a particular time of history. And that will allow you to find some informed deviations away from yourself into another character that is informed by a lot more than just, not necessarily guesswork, but emotional projection. Anyway, that's my thoughts, or those are my thoughts on given circumstances. I hope you found them interesting and applicable. I won't dwell too long, and I hope you join me again. Thank you.